That Movie Nut here with a review for The Shadow, the 1994 adaptation and action film starring Alec Baldwin, Penelope Miller, John Lone, and Tim Curry. Based on the legendary character famous from novels and radio shows, and arguably the grandfather of the modern-day superhero, the story begins in Asia where we meet a corrupted American soldier who is now a drug lord, Yinko, real name Lamont Cranston. One night he is kidnapped by men from a sacred monastery. While there, Cranston is taught by the mystic, the Tulku, to turn his own evil into a form of power, clouding men's minds, so that he may atone for his sins as a drug lord. Cut to several years later where we arrive in New York and the Shadow's battle against crime is underway. However, another student of the Tulku, Shiwan Khan, the last descendant of the fearsome warrior Genghis Khan, has also arrived in New York with a plan to continue where his ancestors left off and take over the world. And so begins a duel of two men both dealing with legacy, one trying to escape and reform it, the other embracing it. The cast all around is quite good. Alec Baldwin does very well in the titular role. And though his voice is not as distinctive as some of the classic radio shadows like Orson Welles, his raspy qualities definitely fit the character well, and he manages to do the Shadow's famous laugh threateningly, but also giving the role a lot of quiet menace, especially when he's Lamont Cranston and he's thinking over what he's done in the past, and you can sense the inner darkness in him, the inner evil that he secretly fears might someday come out again. And it would have been very easy to just go over the top and silly with this role, but Baldwin restrains himself, and it is a good performance. Penelope Miller as Margot Lane, the Shadow's eternal companion, is decent and has competent chemistry with Baldwin, though at times her voice is a little bit too airheaded and light for a woman who's meant to have some determination to her. Of course, the major people to talk about here are John Lone as Shiwan Khan, Tim Curry as the Weasley scientist Farley Claymore, and Ian McKellen, yes, the Sir Ian McKellen, as Margot's father, the scatterbrained scientist Reinhardt Lane. All three do well in their roles, though Lone and Curry, especially Curry, tend to go a little bit over the top at times. And frequently, Curry does his bug-eyed stare and toothy grin, which for some might be a little bit overbearing and irritating, though I personally didn't have a problem with it. Thankfully, Lone's over-the-top moments are far, far less, and like Baldwin, he does bring some subtle menace to the role, sort of like a James Bond villain in a way. And McKellen, though he does well enough in the role of the scientist, it's Ian McKellen. The guy rarely delivers a bad performance, if ever. He isn't given a terrible amount to do, which is a shame, especially considering what he did later in his career when relating to big-budget movies. Speaking of which, the production values here, considering this movie was made for $40 million, look really good. The Art Deco design, the 1930s setting, all the buildings, the costumes, they look really great, and a lot of them feel like something you would definitely see on one of the classic Shadow pulp covers. And the Shadow himself looks relatively accurate to most of the drawings, though the main influence here was Mike Kaluda's artwork from the 70s and the 90s. And you can tell that by the long flowing trench coat and cape that the Shadow has in this movie, which feel like a live-action transition of Kaluda's fluid style of artwork. Heck, even the Shadow's sanctum, which is described in the stories as just being a dark place with a single blue light, here it's fleshed out. It looks Oriental crossed with a gentleman's club, and it's actually really well designed, and it makes a nice change from the usual dank, dreary hideouts and caves that most superheroes stay at. Furthermore, veteran Jerry Goldsmith, who's one of my favorite composers and who you might know as the man who provided the score for Alien, the first Star Trek movie, and a whole bunch of other films I couldn't possibly name right now, does the score here, and it's pretty good. It has all the typical action-adventure elements, the usual fast beat, percussion, and brass to heighten the mood, but there's also a lot of ethereal style music, woodwind and strings, giving it a sort of haunting, ghostly quality. In fact, There are times where I swear there were cues taken directly from the original Radio Shadow theme, which was also quite ethereal, and it perfectly complements the character. But of course, looking and sounding pretty isn't everything, as we now talk about the script. The script here was written by David Coep, who you might know as the guy who wrote Spider-Man and Jurassic Park and a whole bunch of other movies. He's a Spielberg regular. And he handles it pretty well. There are a lot of great little witty lines of dialogue here and there, though not too much to make it a farce. And certainly nothing that would seem so far out of place in a Shadow story, especially in the radio ones where occasionally he did make small quips. And that's the important thing here. This is a film that combines both of the major versions of the Shadow. It combines the look, the setting, the agents, the guns of the pulp novels with the mystical powers and ethereal quality of the radio show. And I'll just say right here and now, it's a pretty good blend, as it allows us to get an interesting origin story for the Shadow. The idea of a horrible person then becoming a hero and trying to redeem himself is a fairly interesting one and wasn't all that common, especially in superhero movies of the time and superheroes in general. Most of them were either good people or just ordinary guys. And in the original stories, the Shadow was never given a set origin. It was always bundled about. And this is actually a pretty decent one, and is very much fitting of the character and the character's original conception back in the 30s. And that further brings up the film's key theme, which is legacy. Shi-Wan Khan, who by the way has probably one of the best villain motivations for taking over the world, since his is about family legacy and wanting to continue where his ancestors left off, while the Shadow is reforming from his evil ways and trying to carve out a new path in life. One is embracing his legacy, the other is trying to escape and change it. And that, again, for the time, was pretty interesting, and it definitely adds an extra level to the movie that I could have very easily not had, and it could have been just another, fun little 30s movie. The director of the film, Russell Mulcahy, who did the original Highlander, is right at home here. His slick directing and editing skills fit perfectly. The story is very fast paced. Even when there are points which are a little undercooked or underdeveloped, which we'll get into in a moment, they're never there long enough so that it really drills into your mind and makes you think, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right. He keeps things going at a consistent pace. He knows how to shoot the action well. He knows how to use the sets and the visual effects to their utmost to make things look good. And the cast seem to be having a good amount of fun with the pulpy, adventure-y material. Now, despite everything I said, the film is not without its flaws. Despite being based on one of the oldest superheroes around, and even with that context kept in mind, they're still not getting around the fact that the film is riddled with cliches. You got the typical standoff dialogue, you got the ticking bomb, you've got the hero trapped in a gigantic death trap with seemingly no way out. There's quite a few of them. Personally, I wasn't annoyed by it because, again, I have the context of being a fan of the franchise as well as understanding that the film is fully aware of what it is. It's a fun summer movie that's also paying respect to one of the most important characters of 20th century literature. And it keeps that fun aspect there, as I said. And some parts here and there have those Vicky in the Batcave type of moments. Those little, wait, why did that happen moments? Like Shi-Wan Khan's plan. I mean, I'm not going to spoil what it is exactly, but when you really think about it, it's like, well, wait, if you're going to be doing this particular plan, then how exactly does this fit into conquering the world? I mean, yeah, what you get out of it might be helpful, but wouldn't it be more useful to ask for something a little more meaningful, like a stretch of land or a office of power? Plus, there's a character introduced, Dr. Roy Tam, who the Shadow saves early in the film, and is really only there for a piece of exposition, which relates to part of Khan's plan. And really, it seemed like a wasted opportunity. I wish that Tam had been more actively involved in serving the Shadow. Plus, it makes the Shadow feel a little less like a detective if he just has somebody outright say it. And that's really the only severe hiccup as far as the writing in the film goes. And though his powers are explained as all being based around concentration, and at times it feels a little too Jedi-ish, like when he's in the restaurant and he pulls a little trick on his uncle. It just feels a little too Star Warsy. And Jonathan Winters, who plays the aforementioned uncle, who's also the police commissioner, sadly doesn't get much to do, despite himself being a always dependable bit player. And like Roy Tam, he's only there really for some cheap exposition. Though thankfully he delivers it in a way that doesn't make it painful. But despite all of this, that fun factor, the quality of it, all of that shone through, the little moments of just brilliance or Shadow fan service, all of it came together enough so that even with those few hiccups here and there, Coep's script and Mulcahy's direction fit together perfectly and did what they should have done. They provided a fun movie that even if you're not a Shadow fan, you can get into, as well as giving you a good chunk of information about the character. It never insults your intelligence, it's not brain-bendingly stupid, and I came into this expecting what I got out of it, a fun, pulpy summer movie. Is it among the great superhero movies? No, it definitely has the problems that riddled superhero films from the 90s. But still, it's a fun ride, and it's actually aged better than some of its contemporaries. And so I must give The Shadow a silver star. Whatever few problems it might have with character and plot, these are very minor and they don't stop the film from doing what it should do. It's a great introduction to the character for those of you who are not familiar with him, as it offers you essentially a big combination of various facets of the character's history, and so much of it works that in the end you'll be enjoying yourself and having a fun time.